Good morning. I'm Dwayne Lindo, and welcome to this Sunday's edition of Black Almanac. Today we address the HIV epidemic and important information about the virus. HIV is talked about more than ever. We see commercials, even TV shows about the virus. Then why is HIV such a problem in communities around the country? On today's show, for an in-depth discussion, Jasmine Akins, health educator for the Florida Department of Health, Alex Redmond, Director of Media Relations for CAN Community of Health, and Demetrius Jafunza, CAN's Chair of Strategic Planning. Good morning, everyone. Today's topic, HIV awareness. This is something that is very important. Awareness is very important throughout communities all over the country. And I have some distinguished members of the community with me. Demetrius Jafunza, Alex Redmond, and Miss Jasmine. Thank you guys for being here.
Happy to be here.
So, Jasmine, I'm going to ask you right off the bat, with all the education, research, treatments that we've seen over the years, how has the face of HIV changed throughout, say, the past decade?
Sure. So there's a lot of research going into HIV right now. We are seeing the numbers, unfortunately, still going up. They're climbing, especially within the last 3 years. But it's interesting because the face of HIV is sort of changing a little bit. You know, we're trying to get rid of a lot of the stigmas that are associated with HIV. And I think, you know, we've got a pretty good start. You know, so we're doing a lot of the education instead of, you know, a lot of the fear that might have been there. So a lot of the education, you know, to students and children as well, you know, not just adults, and really just making sure that people understand this virus, you know, so that they can prevent it and know that it's not something that they have to be afraid of.
Now, what do you attribute the rise to specifically? Because, again, you know, we talk about education. Education is a focal point when we're in the communities, when we're out and about, but why the rise? I mean, it seems like it should be declining, at least from where I'm looking.
No, sure, absolutely, and I wish that were true. There are a lot of reasons as to why the HIV virus, you know, our numbers are going up, but one of the major ones that we're seeing, unfortunately, is the opioid crisis that we're also dealing with, and with that, you know, comes needles, you know, with heroin usage, and, you know, using an infected needle or a needle that's been used by someone who has HIV, whether they know it or not, is a very easy way to inject the virus directly into the bloodstream. So we're kind of handling, you know, two things at once,
right?
And you know the rates are just going up.
Right. And Alex, I know CAN Community Health, you guys are in the community constantly. Even last month, I know there was a push for free HIV testing. That was something that CAN put together. From CAN's perspective, what is CAN doing? I mean, obviously we mentioned the free HIV testing, but what is CAN doing throughout the community to try to bring these numbers down?
Oh, absolutely. We actually are using PrEP, which is a pre-exposure prophylaxis. It's something that we actually encourage people to get on. And when you ask who should be on PrEP, anybody that's considering engaging in intimacy or is engaging in intimacy, because as we know, we don't really plan for that first time, but this is actually a pill that was used in the treatment of HIV that a positive person who had a negative partner, that's how they did the clinical trials, and they were both on that same pill which treats HIV together, and the person that did not have HIV did not get it. So now we are encouraging people that do not have HIV to take this medication called PrEP. The drug itself is called Truvada. They take 1 pill a day, and it will help to keep them from getting an HIV transmission. And of course, we are promoting the use of condoms, because condomless sex really puts somebody at risk of HIV. We know that with condoms and with PrEP that you can avoid a transmission in the high 90s. So why would you not do that? And we're not encouraging people to go out there and have sex, particularly young people. But again, people don't plan for the first time. So if you have a young person, why would you not give them these tools before that first time? Because after all, you can get HIV the first time or the 10th time. There is no good or bad HIV. It's just sad if someone gets it when we know it's preventable.
Right, and speaking of, being preventable, I mean, education, I think, for the most part, is one of the focal points when it comes to preventing this virus or any STD for that matter. But in terms of education, is there something that CAN does to try to get folks to maybe abstinence, or I don't know, but is there something CAN does that educates the masses, if you will?
Well, we have an outreach team. It's a prevention and education team of amazing people from diversified backgrounds, which is really important because when you're going to different communities, people want to see somebody or hear somebody that they can actually relate to. So we have people in Palmetto where we have Spanish-speaking people there that can help people that maybe English is their second language. We have a variety of people with a variety of complexions from a variety of lifestyles, and those guys are out there distributing flyers, talking to people, going to events, testing. And of course the danger is in not being tested, because if you get tested, you can get treated and you can manage having HIV. We have people that are living with HIV that do very, very well. But if you don't know that you're HIV positive, you not only can have your health decline, but you're passing it on. And 1 in 7 people do not know that they are HIV positive. So don't be scared of the people that are positive that know their status, because they're in treatment and their viral load may be so low that it's very hard to pass that on, virtually undetectable. It's undetectable. So it's very hard to pass it on. So be scared of the people that don't get tested and don't know their status.
And Demetrius, Alex mentioned that there's folks in the community that folks can relate to. You're a pastor. Right. You're actually talking to folks in the community. What specifically do you do? What role do you play in trying to educate folks about the virus and how to prevent it?
I tell the truth. I don't undercut anything. I allow people to be themselves when they ask me certain questions about it, because for some particular reason there's a stigma in the community that nobody wants to talk about this. And as a pastor, this is what I also witness in the church. We tend to always talk about the other things, the prosperity type stuff, but we don't talk about the stuff that affects people every day. And I just felt that it's time that we address the elephant that's in the room and start walking by it and not talking about it at all.
Right. So, I mean, is this something you've been doing for a while for CAN? I mean,
yes.
Even before you were with CAN, how long have you been with CAN, by the way?
A little over 2 years.
Okay. So even prior to that, I mean, were you in the community trying to educate folks on basically what to do, what not to do, that type of thing? Or, I mean, so.
Yeah, prior to joining the CAN, the NAACP has an initiative about the Black church and HIV. And there was some information that was sent to us, and I just shared that information. But once I joined CAN, the education went up, because that's what CAN does, educates you a lot. And since the education went up, I was able not only to just talk about it, but to provide useful information that can be used for the congregation that they can go out and share with others. So by that happening, now we're trying to formulate a coalition of churches coming together to where each church once a month do testing and education to eliminate this stigma.
And I'm glad you guys are preaching education, because I think that's first and foremost when it comes to trying to prevent this virus from spreading. But Jasmine, you mentioned part of the reason I think there's a high number is because of this opioid crisis. I know Manatee County, the numbers are down in Manatee County, by the way, over the past year. So kudos to the Manatee County Sheriff's Office for trying to get those numbers down in terms of people who are people who are overdosing and that type of thing on whether it be heroin or fentanyl, that type of thing. But how does drugs play a part in, I mean, how do you marry the two? I mean, they're obviously related, HIV, the HIV virus and drugs. If you can explain how that's related.
Sure, absolutely. So when you take something like drugs and alcohol, really for that matter, when we go into the classrooms, we tell the kids, what is the problem with drugs and alcohol other than maybe the obvious things, you know, but the ultimate thing about them is that they impair your judgment. You know, when you're under the influence of a drug or an alcohol, you know, you are more likely, you know, to do something that you would not normally do while you were sober, whether that be have sex at all, or try something at all, you know, to, you know, have condomless sex, you know, instead because you're not thinking straight, or, you know, just not really aware of what you're doing. And so that's kind of how the two are married together. You know, when you're under the influence, you know, you might make these decisions. And then, you know, unfortunately, like Alex said, you know, HIV or any other STD transmission can happen on the first time or that 10th time. And just like you guys said, you know, education is the key. And so that's why, you know, we do what we do. We're in the classrooms, we're in the community, you know, to really kind of, you know, get that barrier out there and to let people know that this is happening, but you can prevent it.
Right. Now, in terms of numbers, how does Sarasota and Manatee counties fare as opposed to, say, the eastern counties, you know, Palm Beach, Broward, Dade? I mean, is there a higher percentage there? I'm sure, you know, there's folks that work in health departments all over the state, you know, trying to get numbers, you know, down. But how does Sarasota and Manatee compare to the rest of the state?
Sure. So our numbers, like I said before, are fairly high. Of course, when you take somewhere like Miami-Dade, those numbers are going to be through the roof, unfortunately. You know, but when you look at, you know, the rest of the data, when you take the whole state, you know, if you really do that, you know, Florida is still #1 for new HIV diagnoses. You know, so we can take, you know, every county separately and kind of look at the numbers, you know, but as a whole, you know, we're up there, and you know, we need more people, you know, with this mission, you know, to try to tackle that. And again, just everything really circles back to that education.
Right. And Alex, I know this is something that I'm sure everyone on this table has been trying to portray to the community, the fact that HIV is not the death sentence it was when it first came on the scene back in the early mid-'80s, whenever it was. You know, you fast forward to today, there's treatments, which you mentioned a few treatments right off the bat, but talk to me about how you go out and talk to other folks about trying to explain to them, hey, listen, not only do you need to be tested, but in the chance that you are HIV positive, this is treatable.
Yeah. The problem is that sometimes people bury their head in the sand. They don't want to think about being HIV positive, so they don't get tested. They don't know their status. The worst thing that you can do is not to know your status, because if you don't know, then you won't go in treatment. And people are sadly still dying of AIDS. I mean, this should not be happening because it's treatable. Now, if you were diagnosed many years ago, this is how it's changed so people can know. You could be taking, as we have peer navigators living with HIV that help other people, some of these guys share, they are taking up to 30 medications a day, setting their alarm clocks on their cell phone so that they take 5 at 8 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock, 3, 4, 8 p.m. You don't have to do that. If you get diagnosed soon, you can take a 1-pill-a-day regimen that maybe has 2 medications in it, and it doesn't have the harsh side effects that it did. So this will help keep the virus under control, bring your viral load down, hopefully to undetectable, and then you're living the great life. So don't be scared of it. And although people may not want to talk about HIV, I can only imagine that a parent would far rather talk to their child about condoms and about this is what happens with the birds and the bees than getting and hearing their child come, Mama, Dad, I didn't know, but I'm HIV positive. That's the worst thing a parent could hear. So give your children the tools so that when the time comes, everyone's protected. Because you asked about the face of HIV. Yes, it's changed. It used to be primarily what we thought was a gay man's disease, primarily a Caucasian disease. Now we know the face that is the fastest growing groups, minorities, young people between the ages of 13 and 24, right. And women. Those are growing faster.
Right. Now, talk to me about CAN, because CAN has been in the community for a number of years, the Community Health Network. Am I correct? Community?
It's Can Community Health now,
Okay.
but that's right, Dwayne, it's changed names. It used to be Community AIDS Network.
Gotcha.
With
So, right, and yeah, it's been in the community for a long time, and there's folks out there that don't know, and even me, I know there's, is this a statewide thing? I would imagine it's statewide, not just local. So I want folks that are watching to kind of get a sense of this is the place you go to just to, if you wanted to get tested and be anonymous.
Sure.
And if you could explain that process and what CAN is as a whole.
Sure, thank you for that. Well, we started off as a little place on 12th Street in Sarasota. It was one location, and a few years ago we had 8 locations. Now we have more than 30 locations in Florida and beyond. We are in Georgia, we are in many places, and Puerto Rico. So we're very happy about that, but sadly it's because there's a need, but we are there for people. And a big part of what we do is we make sure that people know that they can come in anytime, and the tests are confidential. And so you can come in and your privacy is protected. We don't send information out there that says HIV. And of course we test for HIV, hepatitis C, and other STDs. Anybody that's a baby boomer should be tested for hep C. Getting tested, honestly, Dwayne, it's just a prick on your finger. They draw a little bit of blood. It's a rapid HIV test. And if it shows that there may be something there, they come back within 15 minutes and they tell you. Now, for people that are scared, don't be scared. We have people living with HIV that are peer navigators. These amazing people share their story of living with HIV in an effort to take the scary out of an HIV diagnosis. They'll help you navigate everything. Right. We got you back.
And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because that's one question I wanted to ask, and I'll defer to you, Demetrius. I mean, you have folks that are on staff, and correct me if I'm wrong, that are on staff that actually are HIV positive,
yes.
Correct? So when you go out in the community and talk to folks and getting tested, I mean, is bringing someone who's HIV positive to bring some perspective, is that something that you guys do on a regular basis?
Yes, and that's the most important key, because what happens is that, as Alex mentioned, the peer navigators, when you bring a peer navigator in the room and they talk and they share their story, it's more relatable and it's more real, because now they have someone that they can actually see and hear the story. I was at a meeting with the Sarasota Ministerial Alliance Association, and we had a peer navigator that came in there and shared her story, and the response was tremendous. Not only was it tremendous and relatable, but it was more understandable instead of just reading a pamphlet. Reason why I bring that up, I attended a school some years ago to where, and this is not with CAN, but I attended a school some years ago to where they had a peer navigator of the same sort. The students in the school right then and there understood that, wow, now I see this more differently. So the peer navigators at CAN is a must, and I definitely need that the peer navigators go out in the community and share their story. So I just want to say congratulations, but most importantly, I give the highest honor and respect to a peer navigator that actually goes and tell their story, because we have too many people in the community that do not want to even know the status because they don't want to be shunned. But when they hear the story of someone else, it kind of helps them bypass that fear and go, first of all, get tested, and then if by chances are they are living with it, then chances are they will live a more productive lifestyle because they have someone that they can actually relate to.
Right. So, I mean, do you usually have folks that say, listen, I've been tested, or I've gotten tested because this peer navigator kind of pushed me or had me go over the hump, if you will, to actually do that? So you've had folks come up to you and tell you that?
Absolutely, and I guess the biggest thing that people say when they hear the peer navigators is what the peer navigators offer is hope. Right. Because it is hopeful now. We now are able to manage the virus with people living with HIV. You know, they're taking one medication a day if you get diagnosed sooner, so why would you not want to know? Yes, it's really hard. If your family may reject you, and maybe even church, it can be a very chatty place. It may be a place where you're not that comfortable, but people like Demetrius are changing that so that people do feel comfortable. We need to make HIV a normal part of the everyday conversation. Talk to your children about it, talk to your family about it, talk to your community about it, and let's change those numbers. Let's make all of those people that are on the rise, let's make those numbers go down.
Yeah. I know cans in the community day in and day out. From a state health department perspective or a county health department, is there anything that that the state or the county does to try to lessen the number of HIV cases throughout the county and the state?
Sure. So in our county, we do run a SHIP clinic, which essentially provides free HIV and STD testing for anyone in the community as well. During your session with your counselor, everything is kept confidential as well. You can ask any questions that you may have. And it's the same very quick rapid HIV test, which is awesome. On the other side of that, with my work that I do, we do have a grant where we are able to go into the schools. So my program is called Your Life, Your Health, and Your Future. And the reason we did that, is because talking about this is not just, we're going to hear sex ed today or, some of those other things. This is about having a conversation about.
This is strictly high schools?
Middle and high school,
Right, okay.
actually. We're having conversations about making the best decisions for your life, your health, and your future. So it is approved through the school board and through the state for as young as 6th grade. And we talk about everything, the obvious ones, HIV, STD, as well as unplanned pregnancy. But, we go a little bit deeper than that. We talk about other issues like self-esteem, talking about sexuality in adolescence and kind of things that you might start to experience, peer pressure, consent, all of those other really big things that go along with everything that we're talking about, and really give them the tools to say, okay, I know the medically accurate information. Now, what can I do to make the best decision for my life, my health, and my future, and kind of go forward with that?
And Demetrius, this is something that may be a touchy subject for young kids. I mean, I would see parents having a trepidation of, talking to their kids about HIV. I would think it's important, but I could see some parents maybe having that pushback. I mean, is that something? Do you approach this subject to, say, middle schoolers and high schoolers a little bit different than you do with adults? Or, I mean, I'll pose that question to either of you.
Well, with middle school and high school students, the first thing I just make sure they feel comfortable enough to even discuss it in the first place. The reason why I say that is because I don't want them to take it not serious. I don't want them just to look at this as something that we're just going to have a simple conversation and bypass it. And the other reason of that is because I want to help remove that fear of even talking about it. Because many people, especially high school students from my experience, they will not even support the cause because of the fear of being labeled. And as a pastor, that's one thing that I actually go through with. That's some of the questions that would ask of me, like, well, Pastor, are you suffering from that? I don't think a person suffers from anything of that nature there. And I'd be honest and I answer the question and I say, listen, you can support this organization or the movement whether you're living with it or not. The key thing is not to be afraid to talk about it. When it comes to parents, I'll be straight up and honest with them as possible, because when I know a 14-year-old who has and is living with the virus at the age of 14, something is wrong. When I receive pushback from some schools that don't want to have this particular education in their school, but they have a high rate of teen pregnancies and sexual activity, something is wrong. So I go ahead and I speak to them directly with the education that CAN provides. And the main reason why I do that, if I need to go to the school to address the issue, I need some parents behind me to show why we need to have sex education in the school, but most importantly, we need to talk about this issue.
Right. And I want to hear your perspective too, Alex, because it's a touchy subject, especially for kids who are young. I mean, how does CAN? We've heard Demetrius is obviously goes out in the community and talks to folks, whether they're young or older, and obviously this is something that older folks get as well. But that's another story. But how do you approach children with this type of subject? Is it with the parent?
Well, again, young people between the ages of 13 and 24 are the fastest growing group of people to get a new HIV transmission. So it's happening. It doesn't need to happen. What we do is we partner with people like Demetrius and his church, and also we partner with people like Jasmine and the Florida Department of Health in Sarasota County, because these guys go out to the schools and they speak. We speak in collaboration to school kids as groups together. We unite. And that's the whole thing. We try to get people on board, and it's done in a way that's in compliance with the school system. Right. But I think that we're living in times where we need to change that language a little bit, because if what the schools are saying is allowed and not allowed isn't working, and as far as I'm concerned, if there is one young person that gets a new HIV transmission because they didn't know something, that's one person too many. So I think that maybe we need to revisit this, and I would just appeal to people on the school board to consider once again, would you prefer to have them have the tools so that when the time is right that they can use these tools to protect themselves, or would you rather them come and tell you they have an HIV transmission, or even worse, not know it, not be in treatment, and it progress to AIDS and possibly die? Right. So that's one thing. The other thing that I would say really quickly is that look to, I think, very often a matriarchal figure in your family, perhaps a mother or a grandmother. I think that people listen to their parents and their grandparents sometimes just because they're older. But I think if you're lucky enough to have a female figure in your family, realizing not everybody has that. Maybe some people are raised by their dads or their granddads or uncles or another family. But look to them, and we would appeal to those women that are watching this show today. Let your sons and your daughters know that you are a safe place for them to tell anything to, their fears and their concerns, and urge them to get tested, diagnosed, and treated, and love them.
And not only that, but you work with different organizations, well, the church being one of them, but yes, organizations throughout the community where there's a family atmosphere where it should be comfortable to talk about, obviously.
Absolutely. Right. We go out there and we talk to everybody and anybody. We test anywhere, whether it's at the, we test outside of the fitness center, Robert L. Taylor. We test over at Fred Atkins Park. We test at 17th Street. We have a location there. It's on 17th Street, right on the bus route, right there, and you can get off the bus, walk across the street from the market, and just walk in there. You don't need an appointment. You stick out your finger, you sign a little waiver. It's confidential. You get your test, you get your results 15 minutes later, and then you can be on your road to empowering yourself to take care of your own health.
Right. So the folks who want information on HIV, information on getting treated, how do they go about doing that?
Well, we would ask them to go to CAN Community Health. That's cancommunityhealth.org. Again, cancommunityhealth.org, or just pick up the phone and call us.
Right. And from the state or the county perspective, they can also go to the health department as well.
Absolutely. You can come to the health department. You do not need a phone. You don't need to call us or have an appointment set. You can just walk in and ask to be tested, like test. And we also have a bus called Health in Motion that also goes to different places in the community. We have a calendar online at floridahealth.gov where you can see all the locations. We go to the libraries on a monthly basis, some of the food banks, some of the parks, where you can get the same test, and there's a nurse on staff where she can answer any questions that you might have as well.
Well, Jasmine, Demetrius, Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. Great information. This is something that is definitely needed, awareness when it comes to HIV. So again, thank you so much. It's been great having you this morning. See you guys next week.
This is an important message for anyone with Medicare. You may be eligible for an all-in-one Medicare plan that combines hospital, medical, and prescription drug coverage together with extra benefits that may include dental, vision, hearing aids, and much more. Some of these plans have a $0 monthly premium regardless of your income. That's right. For one low plan premium, or in some cases a $0 premium, you may be able to get coverage for your hospital visits, doctor appointments, prescription drugs, routine dental care, eyeglasses and contact lenses, hearing aids, and possibly more. Today may be the first time you've heard about this type of Medicare plan. The advisors at the Medicare.com helpline are licensed insurance agents who will explain more when you call. Call now to see if you qualify. Call the number on your screen now. Call now to see if you qualify for these benefits. You worked hard for your Medicare. Now is the time for your Medicare to work hard for you. Not affiliated with or acting on behalf of any government agency or program.
Check out My Suncoast Dining on mysuncoast.com.